It's the final year of the vintage era, at least according to CGC. What are the top books on the CGC census for 1974? I bet you know. Or do you? Let's take a look at all the books on the list up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. And before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Take a look at the description of this video for links to my Instagram, whatnot, eBay store, and email. So this is another installment in our weekly CGC Top 10 yearly list. We're in 1974. 1974 for CGC is the cutoff between vintage and modern. And it's kind of funny because if you take a look at, like, truly the comic book era, right? Superheroes, at least. You know, there were books, and we did lists prior to 1938, but they were pretty spotty. From 1938 to 1974, it's 36 years. Now, the modern era, from 1975 to today, is 50 years. So, at least, you know, this is in terms of how they categorize the books and how much you have to spend to get them graded. So, 1974 is a cutoff. So, we do this list. We look at the top 10 books. We count down the top 10. And then we also look at the top 10 for both Marvel and DC. We look at other keys, and then we look at the top book for each publisher. And this data is taken from cgcdata.com. And the list is only based on Universal Blue labels. But I know that's going to make a difference because 1974 is the midst of the Marvel value stamp era. And a lot of the books in like 74, 75, I think even into 76, had Marvel value stamps that were often clipped out and result in qualified grades. But for the sake of simplicity, for this purpose, and this is just to get an idea of which books are submitted and see how they fit into comic book history. So we're going to start the list counting down the books with number 10 on our list, which is Man-Thing #1, his first solo series, and his second appearance of Howard the Duck, Daredevil and Black Widow, cameo. Steve Gerber did the story, Val Merrick, Sal Trapani did the arc, and Frank Bruner did the cover here. Man-Thing was a title. He had premiered in Savage Tales, the magazine, and then had a short run in Fear for about 10 issues. And then he got his own title here, which ran for 22 issues. This particular book, the total number of Blue Label copies on the census is 1,834. Number 9 on the list is Amazing Spider-Man #136. This is the first time that Harry Osborn becomes the Green Goblin. His father, Norman, the original Green Goblin, had died 14 months earlier in Amazing Spider-Man 122. This is a Jerry Conway story. Ross Andrew did the art. John Romita did the cover. A lot of going on in Spider-Man around this time in 73, 74, even into 75. They're keys, and of course we've said before, Amazing Spider-Man, a highly collectible title. A lot of people, they're collectors that collect 1 through 100. They're collectors on a little more of a budget, might collect 100 to 200 or 100 on, or those sorts of things. But people enjoy putting Amazing Spider-Man runs together. And this particular book has a census count of 2,249. Number 8 on the list is Astonishing Tales #25. And this is really a double key. The first appearance of Deathlock, Luther Manning, here on the cover. And the previous, Rich Buckler did the art with Cos Jansen inking him. And along with Doug Bench, he did the story. The second key aspect of this book, which may be more important than Deathlock. Deathlock's not a character that we've seen in the MCU. There was a version of Deathlock in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but this is the first professional artwork in comics done by George Perez. He has a 2-page spread at the end. So that gives a key significance. Perez, one of the more popular artists of, basically the late 70s, certainly in the 1980s when he was doing New Teen Titans and Crisis and had his run on Avengers prior to that. And very well-respected artist, and you're going to see a lot of his books, and I imagine there's a decent number of these that are signature series, which is going to become more of an issue for more modern books compared to books from the Golden Age, just because by the time CGC started grading around 2000, the Golden Age creators, a lot of them weren't around, and people weren't doing signings with CGC verification, witnessing, the way they've done in more recent years. Now, the JSA, that CGC is getting the signatures verified is a whole different story. But anyway, first appearance of Deathlock, first George Perez artwork, Astonishing Tales 25, census count 2,923. Coming in at number 7 on our list is Doctor Strange, number 1. This is his second solo series. He did have a short-lived solo series starting in 1968 when they had that big explosion, and Strange Tales became Doctor Strange with issue 169, and then Nick Fury got his own title. Steve Englehart did the story. Frank Bruner did the art and the cover. Dick Giordano inked the interior art, somebody that we associate much more with DC Comics, and prior to that, Charlton. First appearance of the Silver Dagger, but this is Doctor Strange had a run in Marvel Premiere that comes into here. This series for Doctor Strange ran 81 issues up through 1987, and I think this was popularized during the comic boom, when the anticipation of the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was coming out. Doctor Strange was a very hot property. Total number of copies on the census is 3,228. I just had to shut off my press. And I should mention, pardon my mess, I'm in the middle of a reorganization of this area. We had flood warnings, and I'm in the basement, and our street has had flooding. We've never really had any accumulation of water in the basement, but like our next door neighbors got damage. Guy lost his record collection. That hit home. They're a little bit downhill from us, and then and it's a very, very slight slope. And then there's a house down at the bottom during a big storm a couple of years ago, lost their cars. So I did do my best to get all of the comic books off the ground. So that's kind of forced me into reorganizing. So we have this mess behind me that I have to address. And at some point we will be switching locations within the house. That is the plan. At any rate, number 6 on the list is Amazing Spider-Man 135. This is the second full appearance of the Punisher. And this is the origin of the Tarantulas. Great cover by John Romita. Jerry Conway did the story, and Ross Andrew, Frank Giacoia did the interior art. Again, the Punisher. There was a brief one-page cameo in 134. He gets a cover appearance here in 135. This is also a Marvel Value Stamp book. There are 198 signature series and 101 qualified. That means they're missing the Marvel Value Stamp. But I think it's to maintain consistency, we're just going to use the blue label numbers. And for that, this book has a total number of blue label copies of 3,307. We take a big jump in terms of numbers up to number 5 on the list, which is Incredible Hulk 182, the first appearance of Hammer and Anvil, and the third appearance of Wolverine. Here, he has a brief, one-page appearance at the beginning of the book. Wolverine cameo on first page. Len Wein did the story. Herb Trimp did the cover and art. That trilogy of books, right, that are popular among collectors. We'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. This particular book has a census count of 4,396. We go to number 4 on the list, and this is Marvel Premiere number 15, the first appearance of Iron Fist. Roy Thomas did the story. Gil Kane and Dick Giordano did the cover and art. Of course, Iron Fist ran for, about 8 issues in here? 8 or 9, maybe? In Marvel Premiere, and then got his own title, and then that was canceled, and he ended up teaming up with Luke Cage in Power Man and Iron Fist, more colloquially known as Heroes for Hire. This also has a Marvel Value Stamp, but really this is so far ahead of the book before it and so far behind the book ahead of it that's kind of immaterial. This is going to be number 4 on the list no matter what. And we did get Danny Rand portrayed in the Netflix series, and the question is whether or not we're going to see Iron Fist again in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Probably, I think it's safe to say the least popular character in that Defender series on Netflix. But anyway, Marvel premiere number 15, total census count of 5,131. Let's go to number 3 on the list. Number 3 on the list is Incredible Hulk number 180, the first cameo appearance of Wolverine. And on the last page, Len Wein did the story, Herb Trimp did the cover and art. The debate of whether or not this is the first appearance versus 181, suffice to say that this is the less desirable of the two books amongst the entirety of collectors, right? So, 2 more books on the list. You probably know what they are. And you're probably thinking, I know what order they're in. Incredible Hulk number 181 is second on our list. Len Wein story, Herb Trimp cover and art. The first full appearance and first cover appearance of Wolverine. This is the first book to surpass Fantastic Four 48, the first appearance of Silver Surfer, in terms of number of copies on the census when we've been doing these lists chronologically. Hugely desirable book. Pretty much the Bronze Age grail. There are plenty of copies out there, but there is plenty more demand for that book. Wolverine became a member of the X-Men. Very popular character. Hugh Jackman's portrayal on screen has only enhanced that. I mean, Wolverine, in the 1980s was the breakout star of the X-Men. And it's kind of funny, in a letters page in one of the early new X-Men books, like maybe in issue 98 or 99, there were a couple of letters saying, get rid of Wolverine, we don't like him. Like, he's the least interesting member of the group. I guess over the course of time, those were minority opinions, and Wolverine became the most popular member of the group. But, I mean, there's no going around how important a book this is, how big a key it is. And it's also a Marvel Value Stamp book, which is a big thing, right? I remember picking up a collection that had a copy, paid the guy, and I drove off. It was nighttime. And I had the box with this era of Incredible Hulk on the front seat passenger side, and I stopped at a stop sign, turned on the dome light, checked to see that it was there, right? Because it was a very large collection I was getting. So, yeah, that's something you always want to check, because that's going to significantly bring down the value. This particular book, I'm trying to see my notes. It does have 1,350 qualified copies. Also has another 1,507 signature series. But the total blue label on the census for this is 15,206. First time we've had a book with more than 10,000 copies on the census. But it's not number 1 on the list. Right? By process of elimination, I bet you can figure out what that is. And it's Amazing Spider-Man 129, the first appearance of the Punisher. Jerry Conway did the story, Ross Andrew did the art, Gil Kane, John Romita did the cover. It's also the first appearance of the Jackal, but nobody cares about that. It's all about the first appearance of the Punisher. Again, much like Wolverine, breakout star in the 80s. Took a while. He had guest appearances, and then he got his own limited series, and then his own series. And then there was the first movie starring Dolph Lundgren. The movie was okay. Dolph Lundgren's performance was really bad. And then there were subsequent films. And it really wasn't until John Bernthal portrayed him in the Netflix series. Now, everybody, well, not everybody, but the vast majority of fandom loved John Bernthal as a Punisher. And the came back in, of course, Daredevil Born Again. And he's going to get a special. There's just going to be, we're going to see more of Bernthal as the Punisher. The classic anti-hero, and just a very desirable book. Not as valuable. And we don't talk about value here. Really, we're interested in just how many books have been submitted, but that does have a correlation to value. Books that are valuable and still, maybe couple $100 in a .5 are going to be more likely to be graded at lower grades than books that are worth $100 in a 9.0. So, I know what you're saying. You're saying, well, Amazing Spider-Man made the list because I'm using the blue label count, right? You're not including all those qualified copies of Incredible Hulk 181, the first Wolverine. But here's the interesting thing. So, Amazing Spider-Man 129. Census count, blue labels, 1,720, or 17,028. Signature Series, 1,720. 88 qualified, because there is a Marvel value stamp in this, but it's a tiny one. And then 364 conserved. Incredible Hulk 181 has 1,507 Signature Series, a smaller number than Incredible Hulk, but close. 1,350 qualified, the vast majority of those because they're missing the Marvel value stamp. And then another 1,016 copies that are restored because, even if this is, got a color touch or something, it has, 181 has a good amount of value. The funny thing is when you add all of those together, for Incredible Hulk 181, there's 19,099 copies on the census. For Amazing Spider-Man 129, there's 19,200. There are 101 more copies on the census for Amazing Spider-Man 129, all labels, than for Incredible Hulk 181. And that surprised me. And it probably surprised you as well. I think probably the explanation of this is just a higher print count. I went to Comic-Con, but they don't have data published for the 1970s. And I'm not sure if Marvel published the statements of ownership for those books at the time. But I have to think that Spider-Man was a more popular book than Incredible Hulk. Incredible Hulk was popular. But I think, remember, this came out prior to the TV series for Incredible Hulk, which kind of boosted his sales. Spider-Man is the guy. So I just think there are just more copies out there of this book. What do you think? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Why there are more graded copies of 129 than 181. Just an interesting conversation. And again, two huge books. Maybe 1 and 2 or 1 and 3 in terms of the top bronze age keys. I think a book that we're going to see next year's list might, be in the mix there. So at any rate, let's talk about other keys. We're going just past the top 10. And the next book on the list is Amazing Spider-Man 134, which is the first appearance of Tarantula. And there is a cameo appearance of Punisher on the last page. Jerry Conway did the story. John Romita did the cover. Ross Andrew, Frank Giacoia did the art. And it's funny. It's so confusing because almost every appearance of the tarantula in the 70s had this same pose. This is very similar to Spectacular Spider-Man #1. There's another ASM book that has tarantula in a similar pose, and he has those. I mean, how does he walk around? I don't understand. Anyway, I don't know if this is pushed more by the Tarantula first appearance or the cameo by the Punisher. Either way, it is a double key, and it does have 1,625 copies on the census. The first DC book on the list is Sandman #1. Joe Simon, Jack Kirby did the work on this. It's really their last work together. The first Bronze Age Sandman, and there were a lot of copies of this printed. We talked about when New Gods rolled out in 71, and then Commandy and Demon in 72. DC was really highly publicizing their #1s, specifically the ones by Kirby. And these #1s, I think just because there's a lot of them, and there tends to be a lot in high grade, there are... there's actually a 9.9 of this. There's no 9.9s of the Neil Gaiman Sandman #1, but there's a 9.9 of this book, which doesn't look like a 9.9. This is the top DC book on the census. Sandman ran just 6 issues before it was canceled and the character more or less forgotten. This particular iteration, there are 1,249 copies on the census. In addition, there's a purple cover variant, which is gets a blue label from CGC as a variant, where just the color strike was different and the background, instead of being blue, is purple. There are additional 110 copies of that on the census. And there are a few, I guess when it's desirable and there are a lot of them, they'll just publish it as a variant, right? The same thing with the Fantastic Four. What is it, 110, I think, with the first cover appearance of Agatha Harkness, where the inversion of color. You do get books sometimes that are printed without a color's reversed, but it's a very small population. They're not really desirable keys, and a lot of times those will get a qualified label from CGC. So, anyway, so 1,249 blue label blue covers and 110 purple covers. Up next on the census is Thor 225, the first appearance of Firelord, who is a herald of Galactus. Jerry Conway did the story. John Buscema did the cover and the interior art. A lot of people like to collect those heralds of Galactus, especially now. Is he going to use more than just Silver Surfer? Could we get a surprise appearance in Fantastic Four from him or Firewalker or Nova? That remains to be seen. This does have a census count of 1,193. Next book on the list is a magazine from Marvel. It is Savage Sword of Conan #1. And it's under the Curtis imprint, but it is Marvel Comics. Roy Thomas did the story. Boris Vallejo did the cover. You have interior art, mostly by John Buscema, but also Neil Adams and Esteban Moroto. You also get Red Sonja here on the cover. And yeah, this was a black and white magazine. They didn't need the Comics Code Authority stamp, so they sometimes were a little more violent. I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a big Savage Sword reader, that they might have also had nudity. Some of certainly the Warren magazines could have. But this particular book, the Savage Sword of Conan, ran all the way through 1995, 235 issues in total. The census count is 1,165. Our second DC book is another Jack Kirby book. It is OMAC #1, the origin and first appearance of OMAC, the one-man Army Corps. This title only ran 8 issues, and then it became a backup feature in Commandy. Kirby was away from this. I remember seeing this advertisement as a kid, and seeing this. I mean, this is a bizarre. This is one of the more bizarre covers in, like, Marvel DC comic books. So he's throwing this. I don't even know what she's called. She's not like a real person. She's like a. But why is he throwing her? And to me, it was almost like some weird extreme bondage that was going on there. But those are just pieces for like a synthetic human that have to be put together. You open up the box and you have to assemble it yourself. I guess you get them from IKEA or something. But OMAC #1, census count of 1,012. Third DC book on the list is Swamp Thing #9, Len Wein storyboarding, rights, and cover and art. This is, I think, the consensus is that this is the best rights and cover. He did issues 1 through 10 of Swamp Thing. This is an amazing cover. It's a collectible run. There's only 10 issues. Swamp Thing itself ran into the 20-something issues, I believe, before being canceled. But this does have a census count of 940. Let's go back to Marvel for a minute. Giant-Sized Creatures #1. This is the first appearance of Tigra, who previously had been Cat, who had her own series in 1972. She undergoes a werewoman transformation and becomes Tigra. And this is her first appearance. Tony Isabel did the story. Don Perlin did the art and the cover. Census count of 697. One other Marvel book that we'll talk about is Spidey Super Stories #1. This is a collaboration with Public Broadcasting's The Electric Company. And I've said this on my channel before, but not in this series, okay? So The Electric Company was a television show on Public Broadcasting, right? Sesame Street premiered in 1969, and I guess Electric Company probably in 73, maybe 74. So Sesame Street was designed to help preschoolers learn their numbers and their letters and those sorts of things. Electric Company was more for emerging readers, so kids that were already in school. So it was on after school in the afternoon. It did include Rita Moreno in the cast. A younger Morgan Freeman was a member of the cast. I think you see him on the stoop here as Easy Reader. And they had these segments with Spider-Man. And the thing was, Spider-Man would do whatever Spider-Man stuff was necessary. And then rather than saying something, you'd get a thought balloon or a word balloon. And the kids at home would have to kind of read along. So this was aimed more at kids. They had some silly stories. There was a very famous one where Thanos has a helicopter and he's trying to get away, and then something with the cosmic cube, and then he gets arrested by the NYPD, so he's like handcuffed and put in the back of a police car. And the Thanos copter ended up in the Void in Loki season 1 and exploded the value of that book as people tried to get it. But there are collectors that go after these, very difficult to get in grade because, again, they were meant for kids. Spidey Super Stories ran for 57 issues, and this number 1 Gene Thomas story, Win Mortimer, and Mike Esposito did the art, and John Romita did the cover. This has a census count of 489. The 4th DC comic on the list is Swamp Thing number 10, Wrightson and Ween. This is the last issue by Bernie Wrightson, and census count of 486. The 5th DC book on the list is Swamp Thing. Oops, I missed it. Swamp Thing number 8. Yeah, I did. Which is another Ween and Wrightson. Again, people try to put that together in high grade, and Swamp Thing 8 has a census count of 442. The 6th DC book on the list is Batman 255. This is a 100-page super spectacular. Len Wein did the story, Neil Adams art, and a Neil Adams and Nick Cardy cover. I believe Neil Adams did the main image there with Batman and the werewolf, and Nick Cardy maybe did the others that are highlighting the reprints. So once the 100-page Super Spectacular had its own unique run from like 71 to 73, I believe. And then they did the 100-page Super Spectacular run in a number of comic books. Most of their major titles had 100-page Super Spectaculars for a good portion of 1974. And they would, generally speaking, like we have here, have an original story as the lead story and then a bunch of reprints that were related to the title. And they had some other features in there. And that, again, this was a huge part of my comic book youth. I love these 100-pagers. And I guess some other people do. Census count 269. 7th DC book on the list is Adventure Comics number 431. This is the beginning of a 10-issue run with Spectre being the lead character. Black Orchid had been the lead prior to this, and then I think after that it was Aquaman and Superboy. Mike Fleischer did the story. Jim Aparo did the art and the cover, where the Spectre became the wrath of God. And you can see here, he would punish evildoers in the most unsettling of ways, like having this guy's hands melt. There was a guy who had been a puppeteer that he turned into wood. It was really creepy stuff. I think it would be a great idea for a TV series with the Spectre, getting retribution, like kind of body horror kind of thing. At any rate, it ran 10 issues through issue 440, and this is a census count of 261. The 8th DC book on the list is another Batman 100-page Super Spectacular, issue number 258. This is the first mention of Arkham Hospital, which would later be called Arkham Asylum, and a very, very much a part of Batman lexicon, including the name of the video game. Census count here of 238. Denny O'Neil did the story. Nick Cardy did the cover. Irv Novick did the interior art. And there's the interior art by Pat Broderick as well. And you can see here just a few months later, the 100-pager's gone from 50 cents to 60 cents. The 9th DC book on the list is Rima the Jungle Girl number 1. I believe, is this the first appearance of Rima? Joe Kubert did the cover. Jack Olick and Nestor did the story. Nestor Redondo did the art. Rima was that now I did have picked this up when I was a kid. Rima comics character. She was in the 1904 novel Green Mansions: A Romance of the Tropical Forest by W.H. Hudson. Primitive Girl, The Shrinking Rainforest of South America. Film adaptation was made in 1959 starring Audrey Hepburn. Huh. I never knew that. That is very interesting. The Rima was in the all-new Super Friends hour from 77 to 1980. Um, yeah, the adaptation of the movie deviated far from the novel. She was in Green Mansions was adapted in Classics Illustrated number 90 in 1951. And then Rima was also included in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I'm guessing, certainly at this point in time, it might have been true in the 1970s, that she was public domain. I have to imagine that is the case. That is really interesting. I didn't even know this until right now, that was the case for Rima the Jungle Girl. So Rima the Jungle Girl does have a movie adaptation. That is kind of bizarre. This title for DC lasted just 7 issues. Again, heavily promoted first issue collector's item. O'Neill and Adams are moving kind of away. You know, Green Lantern had been canceled in 72. They're not really doing that much new stuff and, innovative stuff in Batman. So just DC, no books in the top 10. And this, so we're going to go to the Rima has a census count of 225. We're going to go to the 10th book from DC, which is 133rd overall, and it's Detective Comics 441, a 100-page super spectacular, which is the first appearance of Harvey Bullock. Archie Goodwin did the story, Howard Chaykin and Walt Simonson did the art, and Jim Aparo did the cover. Goodwin and Simonson also did, and you see in the middle, at the bottom there, the all-new Manhunter, Paul Kirk, who was adapted from the Golden Age Manhunter. And then you have these other circles indicating reprints. I really enjoyed this as a kid because I hadn't heard of some of these characters. By this time, I think I had heard of Eclipso and a little bit of Plastic Man, but not Ibis or the Spider. Ibis was from Fawcett Comics and the Spider from Quality Comics, as was Plastic Man. So you just got a nice breadth of stories, and just something I really enjoy. Census count of 190. So let's go past Marvel and DC. Well, kind of. The next book is from Aurora, the Model Kit Company. And this is Aurora Comic Scenes number 186-140 with Superboy. It's an instruction book for Superboy. It's 16 pages. 11 pages are a comic story, which details kind of what was depicted in the model. Marv Wolfman did the story, and Dave Cockrum did the art. And then the last 5 pages were the instructions of how to put the model together. So, models aren't really that popular a thing nowadays, but they were very popular when I was a kid. Aurora did models of planes and that kind of thing from their beginnings. In 1961, they started adapting characters, and the first one they did was Frankenstein. Other characters related to movies and TV series, etc. And they took on superheroes at this point in time. The Superboy one is the one with the highest count on the census, but there are also ones for Robin, Captain America, Superman, Hulk, Spider-Man, Tarzan, Batman, the Lone Ranger, Tonto. So there are a lot of them. And what it was these plastic models that you glued together, and then you hand painted them. So the ones that I collected as a kid, I remember my dad would bring them home every once in a while, were these prehistoric ones. And they all fit, all the prehistoric ones fit together. So my dad created this big piece of wood. It was thicker than plywood. And we glued all of them because they fit together, the bases. There was a tar pit with something in a tar pit. There was a woolly mammoth. There was a saber-toothed tiger. There was an allosaurus. There was a cave woman. And, we kind of put them together, and my dad helped with the painting. And, it was a great, kind of bonding experience, and something that I had for many years. These are not, I looked this up. There was one of these available that had, in the box that hadn't been put together for on eBay for $60. The booklets aren't worth a tremendous amount. So the census count of this is 136. So the top book from Gold Key is Star Trek number 26. George Wilson painted cover here. Again, Spock seems to be more of the focus of attention of these. And it seems this was Gold Key's best book. There are Star Trek collectors out there. The Gold Key books do have value. It's like when you get to the DC and Marvel stuff, like in the late 70s and into the 80s and the 90s, that, I guess most Star Trek collectors either already have it or don't want it. Census count of 102. From Warren, their top book is Vampirella, number 31. This is Whoops. There we go. There's an 8-page color story in here. Luana is featured on the cover, and what makes this, why is this the most popular Vampirella book of the year? It's a Frank Frazetta cover. That's really going to, drive collectors, and it's a pretty awesome looking Frank Frazetta cover. This has a census count of 90. Another Gold Key book, which also had a Whitman variant, right? So the Whitman was doing multi-packs, and they had a slightly different corner box, but it's the same books, right? Whitman wasn't publishing their own original material, and they weren't yet doing Marvel or DC books. But this particular book from Gold Key is Addams Family #1. This is the first appearance of the Addams Family in comics, and it's more based on the animated series from the 1970s than the classic sitcom from the 1960s with John Astin and Carolyn Jones. Of course, the Addams Family was based on cartoons in the New Yorker magazine by Charles Addams. And then we got films in the late, in the 90s and into 2000s, and television series. There was a 1973 animated Addams Family show, just 16 episodes, which is not uncommon for Saturday morning shows of the 60s and 70s. Pugsley was voiced by Jodie Foster. And this is where we get the visual look of these characters as opposed to the 60s black and white TV show. But this book gained a tremendous amount of popularity following the Tim Burton Wednesday TV series starring Jenna Ortega, and it kind of took off. It's tough to get in grade. It just has an average grade of 7.07. There are no 9/8. There are 81 copies in the census and an additional 45 copies that are the Whitman variant. Top book from Archie for 1974 is Betty and Me #55. Dick Malmgren's story and art, where Betty is doing a split. And just, kind of, I guess, a sexy Betty cover that this appeals to collectors. Again, Archie books, tough to get in high grade. There are no 9/6s or no 9/8s of this book. And the thing that interests me about the book, right, they're from Riverdale, Women's Gymnastics Exhibition. On the cover, the other 4 towns listed in the exhibition, New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, Rye, and Portchester, are all in the county, Westchester County, where I live. Like my wife used to teach in Rye. I was just in Portchester the other day to see the Superman movie. Mount Vernon is like one town over. So, Riverdale is a neighborhood in the Bronx, and Westchester County is contiguous to the Bronx. Betty and Me '55, census count of 40. Top book from Harvey is Richie Rich Profits #1. Richie Rich #1. A lot of these are file copies in high grade that have been graded. Richie Rich, I didn't even know how many titles he was in at this point. He might have been in how many titles was he appearing in 1974? Let's take a quick look. So, Richie Rich. So, his own title, Richie Rich. Richie Rich Riches, that's 2. Richie Rich Millions is 3. Richie Rich Fortunes is 4. Richie Rich Diamonds is 5. Jackpots is 6. And Casper is 7. Profits is 8. Gems is 9. Cash is 10. Billions is 11. He was in 11 titles in 1974. A few of them premiered in 1974. Oh, I don't want that. Oh, and Richie Rich and Jackie Jokers. That's 12. He had a dozen different titles. That means that, and these were not things that I was, even as a 7 and 8 year old, that I was not picking up off the newsstand. He had 12 titles coming out. I don't know if they were all monthly titles, but even if they were bi-monthly, that's like 6 titles a month, or like 1.5 a week. It's insane how much Richie Rich there was. And this is #1, 39 copies on the census. The top book from Atlas Seaboard a little bit to be said here, is Gothic Romance is number one. This is a magazine. It's the only issue that was published. They were probably like 2 years too late to the party on these Gothic horror things. But what's interesting is it includes art by Russ Heath, Howard Chaykin, and Neil Adams. Atlas Seaboard was Martin Goodman had kind of sold off his interest in Marvel Comics in 1968 and then left the company in 1972. I guess he decided to come out of retirement and start his own comic book company. And he hired Jeff Rovin from Warren Comics to do his comic books and Larry Lieber, the brother of Stan Lee, to do his black and white magazines. And the magazines came out first. So the magazines came out in 1974. 1975, the comic books came out, very short-lived. I refer to it, the Atlas Seaboard, as the World Football League of comic books. World Football League, much like Atlas Seaboard, was a breakout independent league, trying to start something new. They recruited some top players from the NFL. The biggest players they got were from the Miami Dolphins, who had just won 2 Super Bowls. And I don't even know if the World Football League lasted a season. But, yeah, Atlas Seaboard did not last long, but it was only the magazines that were published in 1974. This is the top one. 34 copies on the Census. The top book from EC is Mad 166 with this iconic cover. That's it. It's the number one Ek magazine. Well, not brand Ek, had been canceled. Probably in the 1970s is the most popular Mad title. 33 copies on the Census. From Red Circle Productions. This is a curious one. This is Super Cops number one. It was the only issue. Gray Morrow did the cover as well as the interior art. It was based on a movie that came out in 1973, directed by Gordon Parks, with a screenplay by Lorenzo Semple Jr., who was one of the writers of the Batman TV series. Starred Ron Liebman and David Selp, based on a book, The True Story of the Cops, called Batman and Robin. So they're kind of these... I don't know, more hip cops that, kind of, you can see there on the cover, they have like the Batman t-shirts. They couldn't really put that in the title for trademark purposes, but based on true story, Super Cops number one, 29 copies on the Census. From Skywald, Nightmare number 20, Sebastian Boada cover of Decapitation. That is a pretty crazy cover. Absolutely. 27 copies on the Census. The top book from Trans High Corp is High Times number one, the 4th printing. I don't know how much comic book material was in here, but it's graded by CGC and it is listed on cover price. So a lot of stuff about drugs. Not anything I'm really interested in. 25 copies on the Census. That ties it with the top book from Apex Novelties, which is Zap Comics number 7. I'm not sure who did I don't know if this doesn't look like a Crumb cover. He did do art. Again, an underground book that Zap Comics is one of the, I guess, more popular underground books. Census count here of 25. The top book from Western Publishing is Dan Curtis Giveaway number 6, Star Trek. I don't know exactly where they were given out, but these little mini books. There were other titles in the Dan Curtis Giveaway thing. So, I don't know, 23 copies in the Census. The top book from Star Reach Publications is Star Reach number 1. Jim Starlin did the cover with some naughty bits on it. And you can see that the main image of the skull on the cover kind of looks like how he portrayed death in the Marvel Comics. Howard Chaykin also contributed interior art as well as Starlin. 23 copies on the Census. The top book from, what is it? Co-op Press or Cartoonists Co-op Press is Pork, no number. S. Clay Wilson cover and art. I don't think pork refers to meat products from pigs. A very pornographic cover? Yeah, I think that's the right term. That's why it's mostly blacked out. Underground, lots of sex. I don't know, 21 copies on the Census. Top book from Alan Light is, I got to find it, is Flashback number 19. Mentioned in the previous episode that Flashback produced these reprints from all different publishers of Golden Age comics, color covers, black and white interiors. This is a reprint of Submariner number 1, 19 copies on the Census. From Comics and Comics Co. is Spaced number 1. This is Jim Pinkoski did the cover and art. It's kind of an interesting cover, I guess. And it does point out the difference between Comics ICS and Comics IX. Comics IX generally refer to underground, specifically adult-themed underground comics. And this has a census count of 17. From... what's going on here? East Coast Comics with an X, not adult themed necessarily, is EC Classic reprint number 8, which is a reprint of Shock Suspense Stories number 6. You can see the price tag is $1 on there rather than the original, which would have been 10 cents. Just a reprint of a classic issue from EC, 16 copies in the Census. Top book from Print Mint is Zam Zap Jam, number 1, which has artwork by Crumb, S. Clay Wilson, Gilbert Shelton, Rick Griffin, Victor Moscuso, Spain and Rodriguez did the art. I guess he did the cover. At any rate, another underground book, 15 copies on the Census. Top book from Charlton, way down on the list from Charlton, is Haunted Love number 1. This has a Tom Sutton cover and art. Joe Gill did the interior stories, and Fred Himes also had interior artwork. Just 14 copies on the Census. From Gothic Castle Publishing is Castle Frankenstein 21. Marcus did the cover of this kind of centaur cyclops thing. That's interesting. The signature kind of looks a little bit like the style of Frazetta's signature. Golden Voyage of Sinbad cover and article. I think that was a movie that came out in 1974. That sounds right. 12 copies on the Census. From Last Gasp, it's Slow Death number 1, which the cover art by Rand Holmes. This very much in the style of a 1950s EC sci-fi cover with the rocket ship blasting off there on the left side. We agree, next on, we will trade the black stuff you call oil for the undesirable members of your society, provided you include the Colonel Saunders recipe, of course. I guess they had to say Saunders rather than Sanders. That's how he spelled it. Wait, does he spell it like with a U? Or, oh, now I'm confused. Things I should know, but I don't think I've ever written out the words Colonel Sanders. No, he spelled it without the U. At any rate, that's really neither here nor there. So this Slow Death has a census count of 11. Let's go to some other more obscure books from National Lampoon. Their top book of the year is National Lampoon High School Yearbook. Subscription insert, all interior pages bound to situate 1964 Kaleidoscope as front cover. I don't know exactly what that means. Yeah. So this is a parody of a 1964 high school yearbook. School newspaper, literary magazines, basketball program, etc., etc. Feel-ups, fake-outs, gross-outs, chug-a-lugs, sweet jeans, pressed ham. I don't even know what that 1970s slang means. And I was around then. 8 copies on the Census. From Ripoff Press, their top book was Tales from the Berkeley Con, number 1. This evidently was, I guess, a give out at a Comic-Con, April 17th through 20th in Berkeley, California. 5 copies on the Census. The top book from Christian Spire, obviously a religious outfit. that like had done Hansi the year before. Their top book is Christmas with Archie from Spire Christian Comics. I guess they had an agreement with Archie, and since it's Christmas based and they're going to the nativity scene, it has 3 copies on the Census. And the top book from Kitchen Sink is Snarf #1. Yeah, a Kurtz cover, Harvey Kurtzman cover. Is that right? I gotta zoom in on this. Yeah, Harvey Kurtzman cover, but only 1 copy on the Census. So that's going to do it for 1974. I was shocked that even when you include all the labels, that Amazing Spider-Man 129 outpaced Incredible Hulk 181. That came as a shock to me. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I appreciate you for stopping by and taking a look at these videos. We'll be back next year as we move into the modern age of comics, at least according to the folks at CGC, with 1975. I'm pretty confident I know what the top book from 1975 is, but I could be surprised. Anyway, take a look at a couple of other videos here, and this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.